As marketing practitioners, that's what we do too. We listen to our clients, we hear what the problems are, and we build an easy system that they can put into place.
Jane, thank you for coming into our office today. So just so you know, you are number one. First time we've actually had somebody in person for our podcast. So
Nice.
We are super excited to have you here today. And maybe I'll just sort of set the... I was really thinking about topics, things that I wanted to talk about. I was thinking about the kind of practitioners that I work with. A lot of them small businesses, not necessarily solo practitioners, but you know, a therapist with maybe one or two staff. They know that they want to do content marketing. They tell me that they struggle to, you know, come up with ideas and when to do it and what to say. And so I started thinking about like this idea of empathy and this idea of helping them with their content creation wrapped around this idea of empathy. And that's what made me think of you.
Right.
Okay. Was
Nice.
this like a very empathetic person that I knew, and also into marketing.
Right.
So there's the a connection. So why don't you tell these people a little about
Sure.
yourself?
Sure. So I'm a freelance project manager. I specialize in entrepreneurship and environmental sustainability. So I've worked with a number of people more in the freelancing space where they're building a one-person business, but they need to do everything. So they need to do their own accounting, they need to do their own marketing, they need to also be the practitioner in whatever they do. So I have worked with micro businesses in that sense. So I think the most important thing for small businesses is you need to really think about your target market, what they need, what you can do for them. And your marketing then becomes the messaging that comes out of you listening to your clients. So I know this is something that practitioners do really well. So they meet their clients where they're at, they listen to the problem, they talk about solutions, they make a plan, and then they help the people carry out the plan.
Okay.
Right? So as marketing practitioners, that's what we do too. We listen to our clients, we hear what the problems are, and we build an easy system that they can put into place.
Okay.
So I think what happens in a lot of cases with these small practitioners is they know their clients well, and they know their clients' physical needs well, right? Like, so they know their therapy needs well. Maybe what they don't know is how often to reach out to them, what to say to them in order to keep that conversation going.
Okay. So, like, if we just look at the idea, like, how would you define empathy? I kind of want to wrap it around this one conceptual idea first.
Right.
Because I sort of had my hook line of maybe the most empathetic person
Right.
in your clinic is the person that you should be at least getting content ideas, if not giving the content to.
Yeah,
So,
you get content ideas from every single practitioner because they're the ones listening to the problems. And if there's a recurring set of problems, like let's say, for example, you've got two target markets that end up coming to your clinic. One would be athletes who have been injured, and the other would be people who've been injured at work. So very different target markets because they've had their injury at a different place, they've got a different healing system. So you've got in those two target markets, if you're writing content for just general people who are going to use your services, you will miss those really big target markets.
okay.
So you need to speak directly to them and directly to their needs. And the practitioners, the actual hands-on practitioners, they know what the needs are.
Okay. And can you maybe, I mean, I think you've identified the two target markets. I think and I think those, they aren't necessarily the limits of what people will see, but I think they speak to the, like, sort of two extremes, like sort of give us some nice boundaries,
Right.
Something to contrast a little bit against. So so what would you say, like, how do I go about not being empathetic, but like how do I go about documenting that empathetic information?
Right. So empathy is about listening.
Okay.
And people probably take their notes, their patient notes.
Okay.
Right? Is there a way to take those patient notes and record that somehow in a database? Maybe it's using an AI tool to collect what are the most common themes and problems of our clients. And then that becomes the content that you lead with. So that's the subject that you're going to talk about. And you know it well because you're a practitioner. You do this every day. What you need help with probably is building out a schedule of how to communicate that. Then the other thing you might need help with is thinking about what channels you're going to use.
Okay. All right. So before we go there, because I think those are all fantastic ideas, I'm a big proponent of examples.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
You know, and so we say problems, and maybe the people listening don't really understand what, like, maybe that's part of the problem is they don't understand what a problem is, or what, like, so what, can you think of a problem that a sports injury, maybe 17-year-old soccer playing boy, like what's a problem that he would have that would resonate in marketing terms? Okay,
when you think about who the actual target market is, it probably isn't the 17-year-old soccer player.
All right.
It's their family.
Ah, excellent.
Right?
Excellent. I like this.
So what you need to do is communicate with their family. Unless you're sending that communication directly with the 17-year-old and they are uniquely responsible for their plan.
Okay.
Right? To their training plan, their get better, their get well plan. But if it's the family, then you need to think about how do I best reach that family? And when I think about channels, I think about, so there's social media, that is a way to reach people.
So can I stop you again?
Yeah.
So before we go to channels,
yes,
I want to just give an example of a message. And so now I like this idea. Already your listening skills have come over a hurdle,
right?
Because I was already speaking to the wrong person,
right? Got it.
So you've identified that we're now going to speak to the family. So what do you think? What can you think of an example of what kind of a message that we would be sending to the family that would resonate with them, that therapist could identify? Right.
So the reason why channels are important is because where you talk to people is as important as what you say to them.
Okay. All right.
So the channels that work really effectively in a clinic setting would be something like email, which I know sounds really basic.
Okay.
But when you're doing a social media campaign, you're talking a one-to-many type of approach. Okay. So you've got, I'm going to put my message out. Maybe you follow me on Instagram or whatever channel. You may or may not see that post.
Okay.
Ever. So you happen to see it, or the algorithm happens to show it to you. So that's a one-to-many approach, whereas something like email is a one-to-one approach.
Okay.
You already know me, you already trust me, and you like the work that I do. So people really pay attention to messages from people who they know, like, and trust.
Okay.
So you've already built that trust in. So you're half the way to getting someone to read your content.
All right, so now I'm going to stop you again.
Yeah.
So now I'm the practitioner.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Now I've decided to use a channel, and you've told me that that's very important, and I'm going to agree with that.
Okay.
So I'm getting ready to write my email.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And can you tell me what would be a hook, or what would be something I might be saying in an email to that just based on what you know? I mean, you don't know a ton right now, but just based on what your experience has been so far.
Okay, so there's different types of email you would send at different times.
Okay.
One would be appointment booking.
Yeah.
Make it really easy for people to make that appointment, because one thing that I have found with some practitioners is there's that huge hurdle between actually making the appointment. So that's a huge pain point. Like my dentist, I have to call their office. I can't make an appointment online. All I can do is fill out a form that says I'm available weekdays, mornings, evenings, afternoons. So that means I'm less likely to actually follow through to make that appointment.
Okay.
So that's one pain point. And again, it's really looking at your data to see what's happening. So are people responding to these emails that you're sending out about appointment bookings? Okay. So that's one type of email.
Yep.
Then once they're through their course of treatment, you want them to remember you and to think, okay, is this 17-year-old soccer player still experiencing problems 5 months down the road,
Yeah.
whatever? So then what you would do is you would target your content to sports players, maybe even with a certain age bracket.
Yeah.
And what would be their needs 6 months from now? What would be the things that they were experiencing? Have they hurt themselves in a game? Are they training for next season? So your content is almost driven by what the practitioners would tell them as advice if you ran into them on the street.
Okay. Great.
So, right? Simple,
Great.
basic, like you're not going to actually say, do this specific exercise, do, ice and then elevate or whatever, because you don't know that. This
Yeah.
is kind of general information,
But
but it's reminding.
It's not like, I feel like a lot of the content that I see, even in the emails, is really saying, hey, everybody, we just got a new thumper machine.
Right.
Boom, 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 and this is going to do stuff for me. And I feel like it doesn't really speak to anybody. And so...
Yeah. I
and
mean, that's exciting if you're a practitioner.
Yes.
But if you're a family and your 17-year-old has been hurt, you think, okay, no, I don't know what this is about, and I'm going to stop opening your emails because this is not speaking to me. This is about you and not about me. And here's where the empathy comes in, right? It's not about the clinic.
Yeah.
It's about the people who are coming to the clinic. And if you can always think of your lens, your marketing lens, in who's coming to the clinic, who should come to the clinic, that's where your messaging goes.
Okay.
And if the whatever thing you just mentioned,
I'm not even sure that thumper is a real thing, but I just thought it was,
So if whatever thing helps them to do something better, if it's going to heal them faster, or it's going to make their life better, then talk about how it's going to do that. Not about the actual machine, because nobody knows what that is.
Yes.
Unless they've really geeked out on something, which they probably have not. Okay. So, but you want to think about how are you solving their problems? And that's why you can use some of your course notes to go back into what are the common problems?
Good. So when we're thinking of problems, and I think maybe the other thing that I'd like to get away from is we're not necessarily thinking about a specific injury.
Yeah.
We're actually thinking about how that injury affects. And now I was thinking about the sports player because I was thinking, okay, it affects them, they can't get on the field. But you're saying it actually we should be looking at the bigger picture in terms of how it affects the entire family.
Yeah.
And speak to how your clinic can solve that problem for you. Okay, I like that. So.
And then even more so, the person who's hurt themselves at work.
Well, that's where I wanted to go. That's so funny.
Right?
I was going to say, let's move away from let's move away. So what are your thoughts? Because I think the space that I play in is really in the return to work, into the return to work space. Yeah. So I'd like to have some more discussion around that. So, again, I feel like I'm asking you to do something that's possibly outside of your scope because you haven't talked to these people, but what could you imagine? Because you probably have known people that are hurt. Maybe that's really all that we're talking about. Yeah. We're not actually talking about therapy. We're actually talking about people who've had an injury. What would you identify as their problems? Right.
So you've got a couple of different decision makers in this process, I would guess. You've got maybe insurance, you've got an employer, you've got the employee, you've got the employee's family. Am I right so far? Yeah. Okay. So then what you need to think about is, what does success look like for this patient?
Okay.
Right? And so then that's what you do as practitioners, is you build a plan for a successful return to work strategy.
Yeah.
Right? But everybody needs to be happy.
Okay.
Right? All those decision makers need to be happy. Right? The employer needs to be happy, the employee, the insurance, and the family of the employee. So the big motivation is getting them back to work because they need to earn. Right? That is a very serious, clear and present danger that you need someone to deal with. So I think the interesting thing there is thinking about creating your messaging so that all 4 of those target markets are comfortable, so that they're getting what they want. And maybe this is not marketing.
But I think maybe what you're saying also though is that we're really not sending the same email or even the same message to the employer that we're sending to the patient, that we're sending maybe to the family physician who's looking after that patient. I think you used in our segmentation. Is that a word that you like to use? Can you just maybe just so that we're not sort of going too businessy and on people? What is that? What does segmentation
So
mean?
the idea of segmentation would mean, like, if you've got an email list, for example, not everybody on that email list is going to be interested in the same thing.
Okay.
And you can ask them within your email to vote themselves out of that particular area of content.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes, and again, thinking about this new thing that came into your clinic that you're telling everybody about, people are going to stop opening your emails because you're not speaking directly to their need.
Yeah.
So again, if you can think about with each email, who is the target market?
Yeah.
What information needs to be there? Keep it as concise and short as possible and make it easy for them to read.
Okay.
And so then you can use some of the same content for that email. Like, let's say that email that's going to those 4 different target markets, or maybe 3 really different target markets, is the employer, and the other practitioners, and the insurance, and the family itself, like the patient itself. So you can have similar information in all of those emails, but it doesn't need to be exactly the same amount of information. Right? They need different types of information. So just walking that back and then thinking about your email strategy would be thinking about who's the target market, what's the purpose of the email, one purpose per email.
One purpose per email.
Please don't put 5 things that you need someone to do in one email.
Okay.
Right? Unless it's just kind of like step 1, you do this, step 2, you do this. So, but don't make them do multiple things within one email.
Okay.
That's overwhelming.
So let me. So we just did a podcast last week. We're working with a group called Clinic Accelerator. They have hundreds of clinics that they help with their business development.
Nice.
And we came on very specifically to talk about functional testing, which is sort of outside of your scope of what we're thinking about. But I think that's less relevant. But one of the things that we identified was that the concern, the problem that the clinics were having is the patients were only coming 3 to 5 times. And they weren't coming any more than that. And one thing that we identified was that there was a misperception on the basis of the patient as to how long they needed to come for. And you spoke about it earlier, and I think you were actually setting a very high bar in terms of what success actually looks like. And so if you could think about that while I'm sort of rambling here a little bit, because my question is going to be, how would you approach the messaging to the patient? Because we want them to come for 12 visits. As a conceptual idea, we'd like them to come for 12 visits, and they're only coming, let's say, for half. Let's just make it really simple. And what we identified as the problem was that they stopped coming when they felt better. And the practitioner and everyone else would like them to come. We use a term like they're fully functional. We use a term that we want them to come when they have some durability. Could you just, like, in really short notice, kind of give me an idea of how I might approach that, what kind of marketing I might do to that group and when I might do it?
Okay, so tell me what that looks like when you're a practitioner. Do you explain that process of this is going to take 12 weeks?
Probably not. I'm busy.
I'm
a busy practitioner. You come in, you have a problem. I'm sort of weighing the balance of I have a lot of patients to see versus, and I'm trying to get the best outcomes for everybody. So it's probably a fail point for a number of practitioners. And I'm trying to play down what they do because I think they do a good job. But the data suggests otherwise. The data actually suggests otherwise.
So for example, when I'm taking some medication, let's say I'm taking antibiotics, and the person at the pharmacy says, you need to take these antibiotics for the entire run. Don't stop taking them once you feel better. And they have to remind people of that each time, because we tend to say, oh, I'm good, fine. But then if they re-injure themselves, they're going to end up right back at the same place.
Okay.
And I always say it's easy to avoid burnout than to recover from it.
So how would you put that, like,
Right.
how would you put that in, like, how would that fit into, like, marketing then?
Right. So generally what I do with my clients is I pull the camera back and I say, let's look at this flow of information. So you have the initial meeting.
Yeah.
They book the first appointment.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
Hopefully they're coming back, like, really quickly. Maybe the next day, maybe 2
Okay.
days, maybe 2 days out. Yeah.
Okay. So do they receive any communication after their first appointment?
I can't speak directly to everybody,
Yeah.
but my guess is that they'll have, like the appointment messaging is going to go out to them.
Right.
So there will be appointment reminders, and I think
Yeah.
clinics are doing a pretty, and there's technical infrastructure for that.
Sure. So that would be like a booking platform,
Exactly.
right? I would put some messaging in that booking platform
Okay.
to remind them all the time. Now remember, this is like you talked about with your practitioner, this is a 12-step process, or 12 appointment process or whatever. And to remind them over and over again, you can avoid re-injury
Okay.
by doing this whole process. I know it's hard,
Okay.
but doing this will mean you won't hurt yourself again and end up back in here with the same problem again.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. So that we actually, as much as I was trying to get into this idea of marketing,
Yeah.
maybe I'm looking at marketing in too narrow a band, and you're saying that we can actually do marketing
Yeah.
in our appointment
Yeah.
piece, and we can have it automated, which
Yeah,
probably
exactly.
already is.
Exactly.
So when you say one message, like okay, so
Right.
we've already got two now, because we're
Right.
saying please come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
But we can put something else in. Like, how
Yeah.
much information would you put in that second spot?
I would keep that short.
Okay.
But again, if you've got your practitioners, you can say to them, you need to take 2 minutes and go through this checklist. Maybe hand them the checklist, or it will automatically message to them right away so that they know this is a 12-week thing. And you can repeat it over and over again. We know with marketing that you need to hear something 5 to 7 times before you're going to remember it.
So if I take that one thing that you've
Yeah.
said and put it into 2 piles,
Yeah.
I don't need to create substantially different content
Yeah.
all the time. It needs
Yeah.
to be different,
Yeah.
so it doesn't look exactly the same, but I can really,
Right.
I can say the same thing,
Oh, yeah.
kind of like talking to a child, I feel like.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the way
All of us.
maybe that's the way all of us learn.
Yeah, we do. But again, think about, so marketing is really messaging, communicating with your client, right? So marketing, advertising, I know sometimes they get conflated, but the idea of if you're listening to and really serving your clients well, they're going to keep coming back. You've built that relationship with your client. So with your practitioner, you say, okay, so you've dropped off after 3 visits. Remember, we really want to stop you from hurting yourself again. Or whatever that messaging is, and the practitioners know that. They maybe
Okay.
don't know exactly how to write it, which is one reason why sometimes they need someone to come in and hear what they're doing and write out a plan for them. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't do my own dentistry, right? And I don't do my own lots of other things.
Yeah.
I hire a professional to do that. So it's okay if you're a small office, if you want to get someone to help you with this, even to set up a plan for you, and then it's automated, so it just drops.
Okay.
So that's okay too. I think.
Let's talk about that. But even with that, we'll just kind of circle back
Yeah.
to the beginning. We still need the empathy part, because even the best marketing firm can only do as much as you give to them. Like you need to give them they need to understand what the problems are, and they are going to know. They may from other customers, but they need to hear it from you specifically.
Exactly.
So we still need to start with that. So now let's sort of look at what does what are your suggestions, techniques around marketing? You sort of said plan. Maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of a plan, and maybe with the idea that we're speaking, let's just kind of stay on one topic, which I'm really liking here, which is this drop-off patient thing. So what would the kind of marketing kind of look like?
Right. So I would actually look at the stats of what is happening.
Okay.
So, and also take a benchmark for what's happening now, because then we're going to look at what our results are.
Great.
Right. So same thing that practitioners do.
Yeah.
Right. Could you do this before? No. When working with us, you can now do this. Right. So that's the other thing you want to really communicate to your patients as well. It's like, see how you couldn't do this thing before? You can do it now. And I think that often gets lost in the messaging too. What does your work help them to do?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a key message that nobody says, okay, you've come 3 times and you need to come 12. Well, great. If you're already feeling good after 3 visits, imagine what you're going to feel like after 12.
Right. But again, it's that, so this is the part of the conversation that we were having, which is the identification of what the purpose is.
Yep.
The purpose is actually not just to make the pain go away.
Yep.
Because that pain very likely was, you're only getting the person back to the worst that they were just the day before that they came, versus getting to a point where they're actually going to be able to go through. It reminds me of what we do, like sort of goal setting ideas. And so when we talk about goal setting, we are not saying I want my pain to go away, but we're saying what do you want to be able to do once your pain has actually disappeared, and then even going to the point that we have them distribute that goal list to their significant others so that they know why they're on this particular plan. And I know this is sort of like, in ideal world, so we don't necessarily need to take it there, but I'm thinking that we could maybe have our marketing and advertising take over that a little bit for us.
Yeah, so you've got your words of your clients of what actual health would mean for them. Then you use their words to market back to them. Do you remember when you told me that you would love to be able to play soccer with your kids? You haven't done that in a long time because of this injury. You would love that. And so that is actually the thing you keep reminding them about.
Now that sounds very literally one-to-one. Can I make that, can I make those messages broader? That I can send it to, so I can send the same kind of message to people?
Could, definitely. But the one-to-one is brilliant in the sense that if you've got some way to capture that information and generate those emails one-to-one. Do you remember, Kevin, you told me that you would love to be able to play soccer with your child. You're in week 3, keep going, you're going to get there.
Right.
I wonder if there are ways within email platforms to do that.
Right. To send really specific kind of.
But that is kind of like, that's master's level. Let's think about what we can do easily, quickly.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at.
Exactly.
I don't want to go back and tell them that they now need to send out 100 personal emails a day. That was really not the point of where we were trying to get to.
But they're sending them anyway. They're sending them appointment reminders anyway.
Right.
If there's a way to embed that message easily within the appointment reminder, is there? Maybe. Unclear. I'm not sure of the functionality of each of these reminder platforms.
Okay.
Right? So the scheduling platforms, if they're using something like Jane, do they use, some
that
practitioners use Jane?
Very common,
right?
yeah.
So then you think about what can we do within this platform. That means that I don't need to do anything except for just, this is a field, it's a data piece that I can just auto insert into this email.
And so then if we kind of go back to that, empathetic person, we might have the admin person at the front sending out all these messages. They're really tech heavy. All they're trying to do is just give me one little nugget from each of the clients. Something about them that it's gonna, that's
if you can do it, that's pretty simple. It's free.
But but even if you don't get to that point, creating a list of nuggets or a list of things that you then can look at the end of the month and say, wow, like so many people wanted to return to this, or so many people wanted to go on holiday with their family, so many people wanted to take care of their older, and then so whether we can put the same amount of work, actually, if we can get it into one-on-one emails, create something. But if it doesn't, at the very least, we now have we have a data, and so I think we've come to a pretty good spot. I think when we say empathy, we're trying to connect with the person on to the point that we know something very personal about that person. In a positive sense.
That's right. That's right. Well, you are understanding their problems well enough to know how to talk to them.
Right.
So, and the reason why a new piece of equipment doesn't talk to people is because that doesn't matter to them.
Yeah.
What matters to them is that they're feeling better. Go ahead.
What matters is that they're feeling better to do the thing.
Exactly.
We need to know the thing. So that's maybe maybe that's the whole takeaway from this is just like find out the one thing that the patient wants to be able to do, and hang on to that one thing. And it can't, like, I try and push them away from I want to return to work to why do you want to be able to go to work? Like, what does work do?
Oh, brilliant.
Right? What is what is work itself? Because like it gives you things. It might give you social. It might give you social things. It might might literally give you money to allow you to buy the fancy truck that you want to buy, or it might give you money to put groceries on the table, which makes you feel important. Whatever it is, but trying to go. And maybe that's what you're thinking about with empathy, right? Is that it's not just I want to return to sport. It's what is it about that? So that's okay.
And that's listening so closely to your clients. You probably already know this information, but you think everybody knows it.
Right.
And so if you think everybody knows it, you don't think it's notable. It is notable.
Right.
Because it shows that you're paying attention to them.
Yes.
Now there's probably repeating themes.
Yeah.
Right? Like probably there's almost this idea that if you've injured yourself at work, these are the 5 things that you told me you wanted to do. Like one of these 5 things, right? You could even have them choose from a menu, because sometimes I think people need help thinking beyond that, well, I just want to go to work. So I don't know if the practitioners will say, well, tell me more about that. And that's what listening with empathy is all about. Tell me more about that. Oh, you mentioned something about your friends at work.
Yeah.
And so they're already naturally asking this information to find out how to motivate somebody, because they so much want their client to be well.
I like this idea of creating a menu, because then that's sort of, we're sort of collecting this data and then we're aggregating the data, then we're putting it into it, like we're actually moving somewhere with it to create, if we use your little paper here and we just, like, we don't want to get into, I think practitioners have so many forms to fill out sometimes, but we all like a little bit of guidance, right? Yeah. We're all, if we, at least when we said what is it about bowling that is really important, because I'm doubting it's the bowling, right? Like, what is it about the Tuesday night bowling that you really like, and then we could have some probably pretty common themes that we could come up with. And then all of that goes back to where we were trying to get to, which is our marketing stuff. So,
and that is your marketing.
That is your marketing. That's all marketing.
Right. That's all marketing is.
But that's really the good marketing is content that speaks to people. So then you can give yourself the grace to not be on 5 social media platforms. So you can decide that. So talk about that today?
Yes, absolutely. So that's something to think about for another episode.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, if maybe we leave where we are now.
Yeah, agreed.
But I think what I'm understanding from what you're saying is that we can just do I shouldn't use the word just. We can do email. And that is marketing.
Email is the
And-
forgotten child in social media, but again, that's your one-to-one relationship versus your one-to-many. You also own your email list. You've got consent from your clients to communicate with them. And it means that you're not relying on the algorithm to perhaps show the information to the people who may or may not follow you then on social media.
Okay.
So it's a good first step, and you've got everything you need.
Okay. Well, I feel like we have another conversation.
Totally.
Which is to talk about channels, like other channels.
Yeah.
Because we that empathy seemed to fall into the email channel, and maybe it falls in somewhere else, and maybe we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But I think in another conversation we could talk about Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and but maybe the takeaway from that portion is just simply you don't have to be everywhere. That would be your advice.
Don't be everywhere. Be where your clients are.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know where they are,
start with email,
because you know that they've given you their consent, and you know that they're going to open your emails at least at the beginning.
Okay. So coming all the way back, we started with this idea of empathy.
Yep.
We said that maybe the most empathetic person in your staff should be writing your content. And I thought when I started, they would literally be doing this, which would be like writing the email.
Yep.
And I think where I've come to is that they are simply going to note the one thing about that patient that is something that's very important to them. And that's really all that the ask is now, is for that to be documented.
Yep.
We facilitate some way to collect those little pieces. We can take those pieces, perhaps we can insert them if we're really techie.
Yep.
But even if not, we now have a document that show the data. So we're looking at data. We've now collected data that says, here are the things that are important. Wow, this is good. These are the things that are important to our clients. Our clients think this is important. And we can feed that information back to them to say, you should come for therapy because we can help you take grandpa to Sunday dinner. We can help you, right? See your son play in that game. We can help you.
So it's kind of starting with your why, in a way. Like, why does this therapy need to happen? Anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
That is a whole other conversation. All right, well, Jane, I really appreciate it. I value your time, and I think that was, better than I expected. It was amazing.
That's great. Thanks, Kevin.
It was really well done, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks.
All right.